members of the network, and they founded it here in the United States. They are now living in, well, he's now living in Spain along with his wife and everything like that. The kids are still here and everything. But just where are you located at?
I'm in Ottawa, Canada, in the province of Ontario.
So yeah, we've got some folks that got shows that are in that same general area and all along those lines. Now, you have said, and I'd love to hear your thoughts around this, that declining birth rates will reshape everything from who cares for the elderly to who fuels the workforce and everything like that. So, and you have some ideas around how folks can optimize their fertility naturally and all along those lines, and even have, and I know women are oftentimes concerned about it because I've got friends that are in my same age range, and I'm in my 60s, but I also have younger friends, and they are still concerned about their period, their cycles, and all along those lines. I even had a friend that was having a cycle late in life, and we lost touch. So I don't know if she's still having those issues, but she was having them when she was in her, I want to say, late 50s, maybe even early 60s, which I know is a rarity and everything along those lines. But I just wanted your take on menstrual health, because it does seem like I am hearing people that are having issues around the cycle even later than you would expect women to be having it.
Yeah, so the average age of menopause is 51, but it's a bell curve. So that's just an average. Anywhere from 45 to 55 is considered very normal. But I've had patients even in their early 60s still having periods. That's very rare. And of course, having menopause before the age of 40 is considered premature. And that's usually, well, due to an ovarian failure, we don't always know why. It's thought that there may be some autoimmune processes taking place there.
That makes sense and everything. All of that. Nick, any thoughts around this? I know you got kids and everything.
I think Rick is muted.
No, I unmuted because I'm on a flight path. Every couple minutes, a jet goes over and it's really noisy.
Oh, okay.
But you mentioned some of the implications of a declining population, especially with care for the elderly. When you don't make enough young people, then there aren't enough people to take care of that, which is going on in Japan, where they have to use like robots and all sorts of junk to help with care for, you know, a huge elderly population. And we have the boomers in the U.S. And there are going to be fewer people to take care. The youngest boomer is 61. So that's going to be a huge issue to deal with. But there are some positive aspects to a declining population. One is climate change. If you look at new estimates, instead of reaching maximum humanity in the year 2100 with 11 billion people, now with declining birth rates, we're supposed to hit maximum humanity with 9.5 billion people in 2060, which means fewer people burning fossil fuel, which is better for the planet, bad for capitalism. It's easier to have capitalism when you have a growing population. You've got a constant new supply of consumers to buy stuff.
Kimberly had a question as well, and I know it's something that is oftentimes discussed, particularly among women, and she's the other founder of the network along with Nick. But she was asking, should women be concerned that the medical profession does not do a pap smear every year? And I do remember there was a time that used to be almost a regular thing with women, just like the breast cancer test used to be a regular thing as well. And she was saying, speaking of breast cancer, that breast cancer is almost, and she's done some traveling to, almost unheard of in Greece and Albania and everything along those lines. So I just wanted your take on both of those questions, because Kim definitely does a lot of research and she is one of the founders of the network. So are we seeing less of the medical profession doing pap smears, and is there less breast cancer tests?
We know much more about HPV and cervical cancer and the timelines that it takes to get cancer. And in fact, in Ontario here, starting in March of this year, we started doing primary HPV testing. Now it feels just like a pap test, but what it's testing for is one of the high-risk virus types that causes cervical cancer. And it's actually a much more effective way of screening for cervical cancer. So it's only going to be done every 5 years now, but that's based on solid research. And that's what's been happening in Australia for years. We're actually a little bit behind in the system. So it's a more efficient way of picking things up.
Same deal with prostate cancer, that they're doing less testing because they found out they're getting too many positives for really slow and lazy prostate cancer that won't kill you, and it leads to a bunch of unnecessary medical interventions. But it is distressing, because I used to get prostate tested every year or two. Now they're not testing it at all. It's like, but yeah, it's all based on statistics.
Yes, it's based on research.
And Kim was asking, why don't we do it every year? Because, like I said, she was asking the follow-up question. And have you heard of other countries? You mentioned Africa with birth and their birth rate and everything, but even in terms of health, like she was also bringing up that Greece, and I know that she's visited Greece and also Albania and everything along those lines. So, are those countries doing a better job on their health and their diets and other things in order to see a decline? Because she said it's almost unheard of. It's been ages since I've done foreign trips, so I don't know if that's for my own testimony, but I can base it on what I hear from people like Kim and Nick and others that go travel regularly.
I'm not aware of the statistics in those countries, but really I think a major factor are endocrine disrupting chemicals in breast cancer. And I wonder if it's not an environmental issue.
So we're talking about Gen Z, and Gen Z, I mean, in addition to the physical, medical reasons, Gen Z is not as interested in sex as previous generations. There are more virgins per capita in the US under 30 than at any previous time in history. Gen Z isn't even masturbating as much or drinking as much. So Gen Z is so into their devices that they can't be bothered to try hooking up. It's tough. We all remember as younger people the efforts we went to make ourselves presentable to the opposite sex so we could eventually, get a girlfriend or a boyfriend. And Gen Z has, to some extent, stepped away from that.
Yes.
What's your take on that? Because you have a daughter that is in her 30s and all along those lines. I've actually got to tease Nick really quickly in that same line, and this is an aside and not really about the conversation, but it is an aside.
You're frozen.
Oh, good. That means he's not going to tease
stories that means Lamar Odom and all along those lines, because Lamar Odom was actually recently in the news, and he used to be on this network, the former basketball player. But apparently, he went to a store because he wanted to find a sex doll that looked just like his old wife, Khloe Kardashian. So he literally bought one because it looked like her and everything like that. So it's one of our former hosts, and I was like, wait a minute, we had that crazy man on our network at one point or another, but he did do that. That was in the news.
A whole store. Yeah, what surprised me. So where did your daughter go to school at? She came to the States to go. Where'd you go?
She actually went to medical school in the Caribbean, and they do their clinical training the last 2 years in the United States. So she was in Miami to finish, and now she's in.
Was it the University of Miami or another university?
No, it's St. George's University in Grenada.
Okay, and where in the Caribbean did she go?
So in Grenada. Yeah.
Grenada.
Yeah.
Oh, Grenada. Okay, right. Yes. I live in Barcelona, but when I lived in the United States, I wouldn't drink the water there because it had nothing to do with the water quality, but it was the water reporting quality that there was. Sometimes it was not really very accurate. So rather than take the risk, we just always bought water and drank bottled water as opposed to buying political water in the United States. Because unfortunately, the data, and I think we're going to see. I think we're seeing it right now that in the United States we have the mental patients are running the asylum. When you have people like RFK in charge, and then he brought all of his lunatics in.
RFK doesn't believe in germs. He doesn't believe in viruses or.
He's not a medical doctor.
He's
not a medical doctor. He's a bloody lawyer like I am. What does he know about?
Well,
You
no,
know,
you,
you know about that and everything, but just really quickly, I did have another question for Dr. Marina again that came from Kim, and all along those lines, because she was saying, what can women do to better prevent themselves from cervical and ovarian cancer? Because that is a concern, and I do have some friends that have got breast cancer, but I also know people that have had those cancers that are down around the reproductive organs.
So cervical cancer is 98% due to the human papilloma HPV virus, and that is sexually transmitted. So using condoms as much as possible, less frequent intercourse, those will make a difference. And of course, doing the regular screening, because the screening is very effective. It's not perfect, but it is very effective.
also getting vaxxed. There are a bunch of different strains of HPV, but the vax knocks out, protects you against 80% of the HPV you're likely to run into in the wild. But of course, RFK Jr. doesn't believe in vaccines.
He doesn't believe in vaccines and everything. Hey, John's in Canada as well, and you mentioned you were in Canada. We also said that there were some anomalies, for lack of a better term, from your studies around Canada. So I just wondered if you could talk about that, because it seemed like you were saying that Canada also had some low rates as well. And I know that both you and John are in Canada. And I was also wondering if you knew anything about what it looks like around Bangladesh, because we also have Dr. Sharif, and he runs the World Talent Economic Forum, and he is in Bangladesh. So he might have some thoughts around how his young people are doing as well. But if you wanted to direct your thoughts around what's going on in Canada, because you did mention earlier that there is lower rates in Canada as well.
Sorry, lower rates. Are we talking fertility rates?
Fertility rates, right.
Yes. So I'm not sure why it's lower in Canada than the US. It may be a population thing, because our population is 10 times smaller. And I was mentioning, there are many factors. Certainly women are putting pregnancy off until later. And it's more acceptable for women to say they don't want children. 20, 30 years ago, women who stated they didn't want to have a pregnancy were really sometimes berated for that. And now it's acceptable. It's a choice you can make. But the financial and economic aspect is the other thing. Nowadays, young people don't have a chance of buying their own home very often. And they worry, will they be able to support a child, because it is very expensive when you add up all the bills. It's certainly, it's certainly a factor in making that decision.
So,
and of course, the medical aspect.
People in the U.S., people older than 45 have 94% of the money, of the privately held assets. So yeah, people, Gen X, millennials, Gen Z, they can't, it's hard to want to have a kid if you've got 3 roommates in a 500 square foot apartment.
Yes, absolutely.
Just a quick question on.
We got a question for.
Quick question for the doctor. I noticed what you said about preventing cervical cancer, and you really didn't kind of emphasize the need for not just girls but boys to get the HPV vaccine. My understanding that once that was introduced, the cervical case numbers have dropped quite a bit. So I was a little surprised you didn't mention that as one of the top things that people can do.
No, absolutely. It is very important. Even if you have the virus, the vaccine will decrease the chance that it will turn into something worse. So it's an important part of prevention. Yes, I agree. And of course, boys should be vaccinated as well. Unfortunately, that started later on, because in the research, the initial research was in women and girls, and it took a while for the vaccine to be given to boys here.
Hey, Dr. Marina, just really quickly, what is your take on, or have you done any research about how it is being impacted in the Asian countries? Because like I said, Dr. Sharif does run the World Talent Economic Forum, and I know he's got a lot of people both here in the States as well as there where he's at in Bangladesh that are very much engaged in a lot of research themselves and everything. So what advice would you give to folks that are maybe even researching this if they are in an Asian nation?
Well, I think it depends on the country, because I don't think, for instance, with Bangladesh, I'm not sure that they have a public screening program for cervical cancer. A lot of third world countries do not, and which means that maybe the people who are better off are getting it, but in the general population, they're not having screening, which is a problem. Cervical cancer is still a major killer of women in the third world.
If you want to talk about fertility, Bangladesh is right at replacement at 2.1 kids per woman, which is exactly what you need to have a stable population. So congratulations, Dr. Sharif.
Yeah. Any questions you got, Dr. Sharif? You've been listening as well. I know something. We have this. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is very interesting discussions. But you know that Bangladesh is very small countries, and most of the cases, our education, our research, our healthcare systems, even our policy actually done by the developed nations like JICA, like North American alignment, like European Union. Uh, but I'm worried about one thing. Like today, we are discussing about the population decline and all of the things in Japan and Canada and all of the countries. But I can remember my childhood uh, when I was a student of standard 6. That time, the donor agency had one specific chapter uh, in our book. And I think until finish my 12th class, every classes I have to study these things, and we have to train this particular issue. Definitely, I can understand Bangladesh is a small country, population is a big problem for us, but always the donor agency, they push us with their strategy, with their medication and all of the things, how we can decrease our populations, how we can decrease the populations and all of the things and all of this strategy. But after, I'm just discussing like 30 years before history, but after 30 years, now I am listening from the developed nations, we need to improve the populations and all of the things. My questions, when the developed nations or country like Canada or country like USA or Japan or all of the big country, when they develop this kind of strategy for emerging economy, they go for real research or they go for their predictions, then change the strategy. What I'm learning from today's sessions, this is, I'm actually worried. Why 30 years before, millions of Bangladeshi learn how we can go for population decrease. Now I have to listen why population is important for developed nations. Yeah.
I think we've recognized that this has been happening for a number of years, but now we're at a crisis point where it's going to be very difficult to maintain the population. And it would be different if the population was more evenly distributed. But now what we're going to have this imbalance of all these elderly people and very few young people. And you need those young people to keep the population, to keep the economy running. Older people are not doing that if they're not working.
Yeah,
so that's very worrisome.
Yeah. Let's say the Japan took 100,000 young people from Bangladesh to take care of their elderly people. Mm-hmm. Recently, they signed a MOU with Bangladesh chief advisor or the prime ministers. So I clearly understand, but I think that for these donor agencies or these developed nations and these developing nations, we need to work together to make a better future. We need to work together to understand the countries and develop policy or strategy. Otherwise, the developed nations donor agencies fund actually wasting money and all of the things.
Yeah. Yes.
Doctor, do you support incentives for people in their 20s to start having kids? For instance, the Big Beautiful Bill in the U.S. gives families $1,000 if they have a kid, which is ridiculous because it costs about $300,000 to raise a kid to adulthood. And the countries where this works they get, thousands and thousands of dollars in incentives every year to help. And so do you support programs where the government essentially, pays people to have kids?
I really don't think personally that that's a very effective incentive. And it's, as you mentioned, it's not nearly enough money to raise a child. I think we have to be looking at the bigger picture. I think in society, we have to support parents to a much greater degree. And I even think in the future that maybe parenting needs to be a job, a paid job. And we might get to that point where we recognize that it's so valuable to have young people that parents have to be supported to that degree.
That's a great idea, because AI is going to be taking away jobs, but for the near future, AI cannot have a kid.
Dr. Marina, you just brought up an interesting point, and I just thought about this because I remember decades ago, probably when I was in school, and maybe even can't remember if my nephews took a course or not, but there used to be courses literally where there were parenting courses. I mean, they were kind of like part of the maybe health education or things along those lines. It sounds like you're suggesting it'd be a whole course in and of itself. But I do remember people that, young people, they would have a doll that was supposed to simulate what a child would look like and all along those lines, and they would have to take care of it for a period of time and everything like that. It was part of the school system, at least in the 70s and 80s, as I recall, and everything like that. But I don't know if they still have those courses or if that's something that you think would be a great idea. But I do remember there used to be, and I think it's part of health ed, that there would be people that would have this simulated idea of what it would be like to change a diaper, to take care of a baby, and all along those lines. But I don't know if those courses are still active and effective.
I think education is extremely important, not only for that, but even for young people. For women don't understand their menstrual cycles. Women don't understand, their fertilities, and they have problems such as painful periods or irregular periods, and it's sort of covered up with a birth control pill, and nobody discusses the fact that this may affect their fertility in 10 years when they're ready to get pregnant. So I really believe education is so important, and it has to be at the high school level.
Unfortunately, sex ed in the schools has always been kind of taught in the U.S. in a half-assed way, because half the families in the U.S. are uncomfortable about kids learning about sex in school. But like all the life skills you need to become part of a couple, and maybe parents, it used to be part of the home ec spectrum, where you learn how to budget, you learn how to cook, you learn about what it takes to be part of a household. All that's gone away as education in the U.S. has been starved of money.
Yeah, definitely starved of money and everything. I think Dr. Sharif has left and everything, but what is your thoughts, Dr. Marina, around the efforts of, say, some of the health organizations that are national? Are they doing a good enough job in terms of informing people from different parts of the country, whether that is the WHO, whether that's the UN, or that's a number of these other organizations that are supposed to be international in focus? I'd even put the Red Cross in that category as well. But what is your thoughts as to how they are doing in terms of educating people from around the world?
I am not even sure that's part of their mandate. I think education really needs to be stressed a lot more, but where that should come from, that's a social political issue that needs discussion, I would say.
Yeah, definitely needs discussion for sure, and all along those lines and everything. By the way, Sasha, and he'll be having his show about Ukraine, Russia, and China coming up in about a little bit less than 15 minutes and everything like that. But he is one of your fellow Canadians. We've actually got 3 Canadians, so it's been almost 3 and 3 today and everything. So Sasha, this young lady is over in Ontario, and I know John's in the parts of Canada as well. So I didn't know if you had any thoughts, because I know you've got the young people as well. And I don't know if she's a chess master. She'll have to tell you or not, because I know that chess is your other big thing along with investment. So, but it is some of your interest. So I didn't know if you had any thoughts or questions for Dr. Marina.
Well, yes and no. I think that your discussions are well meant, but they don't achieve any meaningful solutions or ideas or anything. It's just you talk to talk. That's about it. And therefore, I'm not big on a small talk. And when there is a small talk, I'm going away. That's not my style. My style is to tell you in 10 minutes how Donald Trump is killing thousands of Ukrainian children, women, men, and he's doing that for 8 months to be exact. This is not a small talk. This is a big talk. And I'm standing behind everything what I'm saying. And I have a retainer to my lawyer ready if anybody is thinking about suing me.
Right. So to get back to the topic of today, so fewer children means smaller family size. Are there any advantages in having a kid who's like an only child or one of two kids versus the family size we used to have in the 70s where people had 4 and 5 kids?
I personally, from my point of view, I think it's much healthier to have siblings. Yeah, you learn how to deal with people, you learn how to socialize. So that is another issue, certainly. But a lot of young families can't afford to have more than one child. So I think we're going to see this more in the future.
Hey, Dr. Marina, along those same lines, because there was a time that people had multiple children, not just because of the kind of social connection and making sure that socialization, that's the word I was looking for, and everything, but they also had it for practical reasons, because I know that having grew up in rural North Carolina, there were people that had families of, let's say, 8 to 10, in some cases even 13, because it was providing a workforce. They were definitely having multiple kids because they wanted to have somebody that could help them tend to whatever their business was. I mean, not less so in like corporate businesses, but definitely so in like agricultural businesses. So I was just wondering, but that seems like that has gone away. I mean, you don't see as many, as Rick just alluded to, large families as there used to be. But there were times that people did that for a more practical reason. They were trying to make sure that they could have some people that helped them take care of the farm if they had a farm environment and all along those lines. I just wanted your take on that, and I'm sure even your daughter saw that down in Grenada and everything along those lines, because that was definitely a rural area from what I remember.
Yes, well, certainly. Of course, child labor laws have changed since then as well. But yes, right. Young children were helping at home. But now that's really not the case, because they can't do what needs to be done in a household. So basically, they're not an asset anymore from that point of view.
Well, it's been great having you on the show. We've got a few more minutes to go and everything along those lines before we get to the Ukraine show. But I did see that Steve Rao, who in the past has been one of the other hosts, has come in, and I know sometimes he gives like a closing summary of what's going on in the news after I've done my opening summary. But I don't know, because he's campaigning to run to be in another office, because he was in now he's going for a bigger office. So how's the campaign going, Steve? And what have you been following on the news? We've been talking to Dr. Marina, and you got children as well, about the health of the fertility rates around the world and all along those lines. So that's been the primary part of the conversation. She's over there in Canada and has done some research on lowering fertility rates.
Well, I think, sorry I missed the show today. I was out campaigning, but I think it's a great topic to talk about fertility rates. And I think what's interesting is if you see, for example, India, where my parents are from today, 65% of India is under the age of 35, which is completely opposite than when my parents came in the 1960s to the U.S. So I think as fertility rates go down in Western countries, I think it is an aging population, which affects healthcare, affects the growth potential from a workforce perspective. So I think this is a factor in terms of just India now climbing from number 9 to number 3 economy in the world. And that's a good segue to what I'm hearing, because there's a lot of talk about the tariffs and Trump's actions, but India's reaction has been quite surprising. They basically said that they'll be fine without the United States, and They're going to continue to work with China, and Modi has confirmed that he wants to be number one economy in the world. And so I think a lot of it is, that's been what we've been hearing a lot in the news recently. What is India going to do? Well, they're not going to do anything. And then in terms of political news, obviously hurricane went through North Carolina, and we're looking at changing weather patterns. Tomorrow is the weekend is the Independence Day celebrations for Ukraine, and there'll be rallies going on in Raleigh that I'll be attending. But interesting times, and I just want to thank our guests for being with us. I don't really have anything else breaking other than just Trump and the police in DC, and everything going on every day.
Another question for the doctor: is COVID implicated in any of this? Because there's a thing called the Gen Z death stare, which is where you talk to somebody from Gen Z and they just stare at you because they really are bad at interaction. So people have been talking about the loss of socialization skills from schools being shut down across the U.S. for COVID. Is there anything to that Gen Z is just bad at, has terrible social skills?
I don't know of any specific research as to that addresses this, but I believe you're right. I think their social skills were already poor because they spent so much time with technology, and then COVID just made it that much worse. And I think this generation is suffering because of it.
So do we need to offer like classes or programs to address Gen Z's terrible social skills? I mean, when we were young, there was stuff like cotillions and Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, and more people were involved with their churches. Do we need programs that take people, get them off their phones, and actually make them mix with each other face to face?
I think that's a fascinating idea. I think it's absolutely.
Dr. Morin, as we get ready to wrap up and everything along those lines, what advice would you give to people if they are wanting to increase their fertility rates or do better with their fertility health and all along those lines? We didn't really hear your advice so far on the show, so I definitely want to give you time to give any advice that you may have for people in that realm. And if they wanted to get in touch with you and continue this conversation, how can they reach you?
So I actually wrote a book on this topic that is to be published in the next few months called Optimize Your Fertility Naturally, where I look at all of the aspects of lifestyle, diet, exercise, sleep, stress reduction, and avoiding chemicals, and how to improve your health through doing those lifestyle changes, and that will improve your fertility as well. And there's a lot of evidence to support this. So I do have a lot of references to research articles which support doing this.
Yeah, Sasha?
Generally speaking, having kids, it's very risky. Generally losing preposition, if you will take what you are achieving by having children and what you're losing by having children, there is no even comparison. In fact, it's very risky because the children, they can get sick, they may die young, they can go to the wrong school, being killed in that school by a terrorist or by somebody else. And even when they finally will go through all that and will become young adults, never mind that they can be associated with the wrong people, with the wrong sex, and not even paying a due respect to their parents, and so on. So you have so many losing prospects and very little to benefit, even in the best case scenario. Never mind $300,000 that you have to spend to bring that child. So this is a loser's game, and the only people who are dreaming about having kids or so on, it's an animal instinct to have kids. If you are looking from the civilized point of view, this is a losing proposition. I'll tell you, when I came here from Soviet Union, we have one daughter. And if we wouldn't have that one daughter, we would have no kids whatsoever. Once learning everything what's happening here, I would never have kids. Now, she, my daughter, decided to have 2 kids, although at first she thought of having 4 kids. But after having 2, she figured out that that's more than enough. Good luck to her. I respect your decision. I love my children.
So a commonly cited reason that women give for not coupling up is that guys are terrible, for this current crop of guys. How do you address that? Are guys really as bad as all that? And if so, how do you make them less awful?
They're worse than you think.
What's your take on that, Dr. Marina? Because I did mention that I've got 30-year-old friends and 40 that are
All right, we got 1 minute to go.
looking like they want to go for older people because of the fact that they're not satisfied with their current folks. So what is your take on that? And then after you answer, we'll get on out of you.
That's a difficult issue to address. It's a societal issue. But, we shouldn't give up. There's still great men out there. And, you just have to find the right partner. It is difficult, I think, for young women now because men are having difficulty with their careers, with their place in society. These are recent changes that have made the whole situation more difficult. It's hard to address. I don't know. I can't give you an answer. I wish I could.
All right, well, thank you for being here.
Well, we appreciate you being here. We're here to get on out of here, and I've thoroughly enjoyed having you on in this great conversation. So we'll get on out of here. Pleasure.